From the very first moment they entered the venue together, the story wrote itself in everyone's mind. They didn't arrive hand in hand, yet they walked close enough for their shoulders to brush, close enough that it felt intentional. She instinctively reached up and smoothed the collar of his jacket, a small, familiar gesture that suggested comfort built over time. He smiled without even looking at her, as if he already knew what she was doing. That single moment was enough. Heads turned. Whispers followed. In a room full of strangers, they looked like they belonged only to each other. People began connecting invisible dots. They had been seen together before, at events, rehearsals, casual outings. Always together. Never with anyone else. To outsiders, the conclusion was obvious. Someone near the front leaned over and murmured, "They're definitely a couple." Another nodded in agreement. Even the cameras seemed to agree, lingering on them longer than necessary, capturing every shared glance and quiet laugh. When the host welcomed them, the tone shifted from formal to playful. A joke slipped in about power couples and working with someone special. Laughter filled the room, and all eyes turned toward them, waiting for denial or confirmation. Neither came. She smiled politely. He let out a soft laugh. Silence, in that moment, felt safer than correction. Correcting people would have required an explanation, and explanations had a way of changing energy. They exchanged a look, brief, loaded, and private. It wasn't romantic, but it was deep, shaped by years of shared memories, shared struggles, and unspoken understanding. The audience misread it instantly. To them, it looked like love trying not to be obvious. In reality, it was familiarity so natural that it didn't need labels. As the assumptions settled in like fact, neither of them stopped it. The night had only just begun, and the truth could wait. As they took their places under the bright stage lights, the atmosphere shifted. Whatever doubts anyone might have had vanished instantly. They moved with an ease that couldn't be rehearsed, as if their timing was stitched together by instinct rather than practice. When he spoke, she watched him closely, not just listening but anticipating, finishing thoughts with a nod, reacting a heartbeat before the audience did. When she stepped forward, he adjusted without thinking, giving her space, then closing the distance again like gravity pulling them back together. The audience felt it. A quiet buzz filled the room, the kind that comes when people believe they're witnessing something intimate. Every smile between them was examined. Every pause was interpreted. When she laughed, he smiled wider than anyone else, pride clear on his face. When he hesitated, she offered a reassuring glance that steadied him instantly. To everyone watching, it looked like emotional shorthand only lovers shared. Phones were raised. Social media lit up in real time. Comments flooded in, "You can tell they're in love. This is what real connection looks like." Even the judges exchanged knowing looks, leaning back in their chairs with satisfied smiles, as if the story was already confirmed. No one questioned it anymore, they were simply waiting for proof. Then came the moment that sealed the illusion. She reached for his hand. It wasn't dramatic or theatrical, just a subtle touch, fingers brushing his palm. He responded immediately, squeezing once, firmly, reassuringly. The audience melted. A soft "ah" echoed through the room. In that second, the assumption transformed into certainty. But beneath the surface, there was a quiet weight. Both of them felt it, the unspoken pressure of expectations piling higher with every shared glance. What the audience saw as romance was, to them, something older and deeper. Still, they played their parts naturally, not acting, just being themselves. And that was Exa. The moment arrived without warning, disguised as casual curiosity. The host smiled warmly, leaning forward just enough to feel friendly, not intrusive. "You two have such a strong connection," they said, gesturing between them. The audience hummed in agreement. "So tell us, what's it like working so closely with someone you love?" Time slowed. The words hung in the air longer than they should have. She felt her chest tighten, the smile on her face suddenly heavier to hold. He inhaled sharply, a breath only she noticed because she'd heard it 1,000 times before, every time something unexpected threatened to throw him off balance. The cameras zoomed in, catching the flicker of emotion neither of them had prepared to show. For a brief second, neither spoke. The silence stretched, no longer comfortable, no longer playful. In that pause, memories rushed in, family dinners, shared struggles, promises made long before stages and spotlights existed. She turned to look at him, searching his face. This was the moment they had quietly known would come someday, even if they never discussed it aloud. Her eyes asked the question words couldn't, now. He met her gaze and gave the smallest nod. Not rushed. Not forced. Certain. The kind of nod that said the truth mattered more than applause. She stepped half a pace forward, the lights suddenly hotter, the room suddenly too quiet. A few people in the audience leaned in, expecting a romantic answer, maybe even a confession. Smiles waited to be rewarded. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm but serious. "There's something we should explain," she said. The shift was instant. Laughter faded. Whispers stopped. Even the host straightened, sensing the tone change. The fairy tale everyone had written in their heads began to wobble. He moved closer, not as a partner claiming space, but as support standing firm. Whatever came next would change the room, the narrative, and the way everyone saw them. And as the truth pressed against the Sir. The truth landed softly, but its impact was thunderous. He was the one who spoke first, his voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes locked onto him. "We're not a couple," he said simply. For a split second, the audience didn't react, as if their minds refused to accept the words. Then the gasps came, rippling through the room like a sudden wave. Confused murmurs replaced the earlier smiles. The story everyone believed cracked right down the middle. She took a breath and continued, her tone gentle but firm. "We've been close our whole lives," she said, glancing at him with a look full of history. "Because he's my brother." The room froze. Shock settled in deeper this time, heavier and more humbling. Some people covered their mouths. Others exchanged embarrassed looks, replaying every assumption they'd made in their heads. Suddenly, everything made sense. The protective glances. The unspoken understanding. The comfort that never crossed into flirtation. It wasn't romance, it was family. A bond shaped by shared childhoods, late-night conversations, and standing by each other when no one else did. He smiled then, relief clear on his face. "People often see what they expect to see," he added quietly. "But love doesn't always look the way you think." The host nodded, visibly moved, and the judges followed, their expressions softening with respect. The audience began to applaud, not the explosive cheer they'd given earlier, but something deeper and more sincere. This wasn't about being fooled, it was about being reminded. She reached for his hand again, this time without hesitation. No misinterpretation now. Just truth. Just family. Under the bright lights, with the illusion finally gone, they stood more confidently than before. The reveal hadn't broken the moment, it had transformed it into something more real, more powerful than the story anyone had imagined. When the lights dimmed and the noise of the audience faded into distant echoes, the weight of the moment finally lifted. Backstage, away from the cameras and curious eyes, they let out quiet laughs, soft, relieved, and a little disbelieving. The tension they had carried onto the stage was gone now, replaced by the familiar ease they had always shared. She shook her head with a smile. "I can't believe how far people ran with that," she said. He laughed in return, the kind of laugh that came from knowing the truth had finally caught up with the story. Outside the venue, the reaction spread fast. Clips of the reveal circulated online, but this time the comments sounded different. Shock turned into understanding. Assumptions turned into reflection. People began talking not about romance, but about connection, about how love shows up in many forms and doesn't always fit the narrative people expect. What started as gossip transformed into a lesson. They walked together into the night, side by side as they always had. There was no need to explain themselves anymore. The truth had done the work for them. If anything, the moment had strengthened their bond, proving that honesty could be just as powerful as mystery. For the audience, the story ended with surprise. For them, it ended with peace. They hadn't lost anything by revealing who they really were. Instead, they gained something unexpected: respect. As they disappeared into the crowd, no longer under the spotlight, one thing was clear: not all love stories are romantic, but some are just as meaningful, if not more.